The flame that once burned bright within flickers. The joy in your work, the motivation in your goals, and the spark of creativity all seem to have faded. Something feels off. You push harder, hoping to reignite that energy, only to find yourself more drained, more detached. This is burnout. Burnout is not just about being tired. It's about emotional depletion, spiritual fatigue, and the sense that your efforts have become meaningless. And in a world that celebrates productivity above all else, it becomes easy to lose ourselves. But what if the cure isn't found in doing more, but in thinking differently? What if ancient wisdom can teach us how to reclaim ourselves from the chaos? This is the story of how philosophical thinking might just save us from the modern epidemic of burnout. Burnout doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in like a fog. You begin with enthusiasm, with hope, with a mission. But little by little, the weight builds. Deadlines tighten. Responsibilities multiply. Validation from others becomes your oxygen. And suddenly you're not living anymore. You're performing. The Stoics warned us about this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, our suffering is often rooted not in our workload, but in how we relate to it. When we tie our worth to our output, when we forget to pause and reflect, we become strangers to ourselves. Burnout is not failure. It's feedback. It tells us something vital, that we've wandered too far from our center. We often believe we must keep running, keep producing, keep striving. But time, as the ancient Greeks understood it, is not just linear. There are two words for time in Greek: chronos and kairos. Chronos is clock time, productivity, schedules, deadlines. Kairos, on the other hand, is soulful time, moments of meaning, reflection, deep presence. Burnout happens when our lives are ruled entirely by chronos. Philosophy reminds us to seek kairos, to find time for the self, for walks without destinations, for conversations without agendas, for thoughts that have no timestamp. As Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Question is not how much time we have, but how we use it. Most people flee silence because it feels like a waste. But to the philosopher, silence is sacred. In that stillness, we hear the deepest truths. Burnout feeds on the illusion that we must always be inspired, always at our best. But nature doesn't bloom all year long. Even the sun sets. Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic philosopher, said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." We change. Our needs shift. To demand consistent output from a constantly evolving being is to ignore our very nature. Philosophy teaches acceptance, that some days will be slow, that rest is not the enemy of growth, but its foundation, that to pause is not to fail. The modern hustle culture demands constant fuel, but the philosophical life embraces seasons. There is a time for work, a time for rest, a time to question. The soul, too, must breathe. Many modern thinkers borrow from the Stoics and Existentialists when they say, "You are a work in progress." Epictetus believed that freedom begins the moment we care more about our own development than about external outcomes. Burnout often comes from measuring life by metrics that aren't ours. Followers, promotions, salaries. But what if you shifted the metric to inner growth? Emotional resilience, integrity, clarity of values. The philosopher Montaigne wrote, "The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself." When you belong to yourself, you stop trying to prove your worth. Your life becomes an unfolding dialogue with the self, a project not of perfection, but of becoming. Burnout thrives in the noise, notifications, meetings, to-do lists, but clarity lives in silence. Blaise Pascal said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Stillness is not inactivity. It's deep activity of the soul. It's the moment you ask, "Why am I doing all of this? What truly matters to me?" Without stillness, we drift. With it, we return. Create moments of sacred pause. Mornings without phones. Evenings with books. Weekends to simply be. Philosophical thinking flourishes in silence, because in silence, the truth has room to speak. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that people can endure almost anything if they find meaning in it. Burnout, in many ways, is the collapse of meaning. We no longer see the point. The cure? Reconnect to why you started, or redefine your why. You don't need massive clarity, just a seed of purpose, and the courage to water it. Meaning doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. We are not machines. We are meaning seekers. When we lose sight of meaning, we grind. But when meaning is present, even struggle becomes sacred. At its core, philosophy isn't abstract. It's deeply personal. It's the system of beliefs you live by, whether you know it or not. Burnout often signals that your life and your philosophy are out of sync. Build a philosophy that includes rest, that honors boundaries, that sees failure as part of the path, not the end of it. Create a framework that lets you be human. The ancient philosophers didn't just write, they lived. Socrates walked the streets questioning. Seneca practiced what he preached. They weren't gurus, they were explorers of truth. You, too, must become an explorer of your own life. Craft a personal philosophy rooted in your values, your limits, your truth. That is how burnout becomes a teacher, not just a tormentor. Burnout feels like forgetting who you are, like watching yourself disappear beneath layers of noise, pressure, and performance. But philosophy, quiet, steady, ancient, offers a way back, not through more doing, but through deeper seeing. It asks us to pause, to listen, to question what we've taken for granted. And in that space, something shifts. You remember that rest is not weakness, that purpose is not productivity, that your worth was never meant to be measured in metrics. Philosophy doesn't fix burnout with hacks or hustle. It invites you to build a life that makes sense to your soul. Let your days be shaped not by urgency, but by understanding. Let your decisions arise not from pressure, but from presence. Let your life move not at the speed of deadlines, but at the rhythm of meaning. And when you begin to hear yourself again, truly hear yourself, don't rush past it. Honor it. Make space for it. The way back to yourself isn't paved with noise or effort, but with stillness and courage. And maybe, just maybe, the flame returns. Not because you fought for it, but because you remembered it was never gone. Only waiting for you to stop and feel. And in that pause, you become whole again.